We'll be removing 802 and 502 from the, with that, we'll hear on the consent agenda. Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Okay. 103, this was those numbers.
I would ask each of the principals this evening to come forward and present sort of an opening school report so that you can get a perspective of some of the things that have happened both over the summer and during the first week. We have new principals in each building, although they're not all new to the district. In fact, none of them are new to the district. We will start today with Steve Malkisha, our new high school principal, and ask that you give an opening report about what has happened at the high school in the last week.
Well, what I can tell you is that you would all be very proud of the way that the high school students represented our district and our community. It was wonderful coming in and seeing all familiar smiling faces when I came to the high school. The high school was in good shape in terms of the facilities being clean. The fields were up and running and being used. Busing worked very well in the morning. We did have a slight delay, kids seeing each other for the first time at the end of the day to try to get them on the buses. But we worked cooperatively with Michelle and the drivers and the director of transportation to move them along quicker and getting them out of the high school at the end of the day faster. You know that at this point we don't have a permanent assistant principal, but Heidi Huxell has stepped up and is helping out. She's still teaching a few PE classes, but during the day she is helping me out, which has been terrific. Both her and I met with every student in the high school over 2 days in gym classes. We met with 15 different gym classes, and we had the opportunity to not only welcome our students back and say hello to everybody, but we also had an opportunity to go over our expectations, our code of conduct. A lot of this was new to our freshmen because the dress code is different at the high school and at the middle school in some aspects, and they also put into place a courtesy use of technology last year, which was new to our freshmen and different than the technology, the way it's used here at the middle school. So it was time well spent, and it was wonderful seeing all of the students. So all in all, I can report that things went very well, and again, the best part of it was how well behaved the students are, how respectful, and how well they represent our district.
Mr. Murphy, the new middle school principal.
Good evening. I report a lot of what, or echo a lot of what Mr. Malkisha said. In terms of the beginning of the year, the building was as close to immaculate as you could get before we started the beginning of the year. Even with the traffic of students coming through that building to get a layout of the land, if you will. You see mostly sixth graders because this is the new thing. But the building was definitely very clean. We had a beginning of a boiler replacement, which if you didn't know, obviously it's a boiler, so if you didn't know what was going on, you would have looked. But even if you open that door, you would never know it was missing except for the space. It was just, they cleaned that out very well to make sure that there was no debris in there. And from what I understand, that is going to be complete, the project's complete by the end of the summer, around the end of September. We experienced an influx of new students in the month of August. We were about halfway through the month of August. I was told today that number was up about 29 new students in COG since the middle of August in that area. So we have a lot of new students despite just the sixth graders coming in with Noah. Bus arrivals went very well, and I'm one of the newer ones to the building, so I get to watch the pattern. Everybody seemed to know the pattern very well. A couple of cars that made their way in through the bus pattern, and those buses were a little reluctant to let them by because they're loading and unloading. But I I didn't see them make that same mistake on the second day. They definitely don't get caught there. Students came off, well aware, well awake, came to buildings. Because the students aren't allowed in the hallway, so about 7:25, there's that buildup of a lot of excitement in that hallway in the beginning. I met many sixth graders who, again, were a little nervous. Some didn't make it to the building before the first day. And I greeted them with basically saying that we have something in common. We're both through this building, and if you're lost, maybe we can help each other find a way. If I was lost, help me. They actually took me up on it. I've met a lot of them in the hallway saying, "You do need help. You know where you're going." So I appreciate that. We started out the school year with a 1 hour, what was called a 1 hour delay. And where there wasn't a delay from your home perspective, it was a delay from the school. What that did was it accommodated assemblies throughout the day for me. It also accommodated that beginning of the day, the lockers, set, practice those combinations, do the whole thing. But throughout the day, I met with each class. The 8th graders, king of the hill, ready to meet the new principal, if you will, and we had some understandings, if you will. It was very good. We had a give and take. They had a chance to talk to me, ask me some questions, and they wanted to know if I was going to be as tough here as I was there. And I said, "What are you getting on a story show?" But it was good. We went over the dress code. We went over the code of conduct. We went over even the lunchroom. The lunchroom is always a point of concern because that's that social interaction. So we had a good discussion, and the students, like I said, they asked me questions. Dismissal, the day went actually well. When we got to dismissal, we also were just a little delayed in the beginning because they forgot which bus they were on. And coming from the high school, I'm thinking that the buses are lined up like they did at high school, number 1 through 10 or 1 through 11. They don't come in that way. They come in different, so I'm sending kids. One's got to be in the front and one was in the middle. So I added to that delay just a little bit for not knowing that. But all in all, we didn't have any kids delivered to the wrong houses. Everybody seemed to get home, no complaints at the end, and all seemed to go well.
Okay, grades 2 to 5, Mr. Farrell.
Hello, everybody. Dr. Powell had asked in our remarks for Eileen and I to make sure we touched on a few areas, first of which grade level schools, move of furniture and books. As you might imagine, it took significant logistical planning to move all of the rooms that we moved in the schools and from school to school. And to be honest with you, best laid plans. At the end of the day, you're really not sure how it's going to go as far as the logistical piece with the move. But I have to be honest, moving one building to the other, and classrooms back and forth, I honestly don't know how it could have gone any better. The fact that by August 1st, we were essentially complete with the movement of rooms, with furniture, was really impressive. Our plan to use the gymnasium as a staging area ended up working very well. Much of the equipment that needed to be moved was placed in the gym, and then we were able to move it from there where we needed to move it. Considering everything that we moved, at this point I'm still aware of only one box that is unaccounted for, which is pretty remarkable. And it was a box with teacher supplies and nothing, I don't think that was all that significant that couldn't be replaced. So a real sincere thanks to certainly the custodians, Mr. Downs, Ms. Maloney, Mrs. Reel, because without all of the work that they did, I don't think it would have gone as smoothly as it did. To a bystander, I don't think anybody would have realized if they came in August everything that had gone on and what it took to make that happen, because the building was beautiful. It was just like I imagine it would have been in any other year for any other start. It was really impressive. So they really did a magnificent job. facilities work done over the summer related to grade level. We really didn't have much work that needed to be done at Hagen. We had partitions replaced in the bathroom, and we had one smart board moved, and that was essentially it. The partition work really happened pretty late in the summer, and we thought there was a good chance that that would not be ready by the start of school. Everybody really hustled, got it done, and they look great. It's a good change. As far as arrival and dismissal information, both arrival and dismissal procedures have continued to go more smoothly with each passing day. At arrival time, our buses, we have 9 buses in the morning. They're arriving anywhere from about 8:22, 8:23 up until about 8:43 to 8:45. We have a little bit of a gap between our number 7 bus and 8 and 9, and that's something probably in another day or so, once things settle a bit more, to look at a little bit more closely and see why that gap is there. But for the most part in the morning, we're really in pretty good shape. The tag system has worked really well, not perfectly by any means, but it has worked very well. We invite our green tags to come off the bus. For those that didn't, for whatever reason, have them on the first couple of days, we did get them set up with tags. We, like the middle school, had many late registrants in the last couple of weeks of school, so there were a few things to work out there and information that might not have been correct on the tag. So that was really, by the end of our second day, complete and correct. The other thing I would just mention, especially for the first couple of days, and I had changed our dismissal procedures at Hagen as far as when we dismiss, when the buses arrive. Teachers were asked to walk all of their students out to the buses. I wanted them to put students on specific buses, 1 through, actually it's 4 through 9. So we definitely did take extra care and extra attention, making sure that they got on the correct bus. Again, not that it was perfect, but the care and attention was there, and that takes extra time. So over the last few days, we've seen the release of our buses reduced pretty significantly. First day, we probably released buses well after 3:25, which was quite late. The next day was 3:13, the next day 3:10, and today we were 3:07. So for 3 days in a row, all of our buses have been there by 3:01, and today we dismissed everybody, boarded them on the bus, and we're ready to go in about 6 minutes. So for me, I think those are really good numbers, and we actually have one more change that we'll make tomorrow that has the potential to shave even more time off that. So as far as our dismissal of students, getting them on the buses, getting buses there, getting students on the buses, and releasing the buses, I think we're in good shape. I think that's about it for dismissal. School day information, and I just offer this because I know how much talk there has been about transportation. I know for me, and I want to share with you that we haven't lost sight of the fact we've had 4 really magnificent days at Hagen. As far as teachers and kids and custodians and cafeteria, I don't honestly know how our 4 days in the building could have been any better. It was a pretty momentous change for everybody to bring, in some ways, two different cultures, 2 sets of procedures and processes, and bring all of that together. And we have a lot of work left to do with that, but we've really begun to meld that, I think, in a great way. I think it feels good, it sounds good, the kids really seem as good as I could have hoped, and so do the teachers. Now, we have an awful lot more work to do, but for my part, I think we're right on track in that regard. Okay, so, thank you.
And Dr. Cecina, K2.
Good evening. Beginning in the same format, commenting on the move of furniture and books and equipment. I have to start with a grand thank you to Mr. Downs, Mrs. Maloney, and Mrs. Real, who met on an ongoing basis with the building principals in regard to this move always looking at what still needed to be done, and that was so appreciated that they were gathering that feedback and facilitating every aspect of the move. And that also includes the office staff as well at Hagen. Mrs. Nemus was right in the middle trying to facilitate calls and organize events as well. So I'd like to appreciate them. And yes, everything we undertake, every single day, whether we're looking at student learning, whether we're looking at moving and how it's going, or we're looking at our transportation issue, which I'll also be commenting on, and our drop-off procedures, whatever we're doing in regard to safety or learning or facilities, we're continuously evaluating how it's going and what do we do to make it better. And that's what I appreciate. And some of that feedback is gathered as well as I look at the partnership with people involved. It's not only district office staff, the staff within buildings, it's our wonderful community who provides feedback. And that's been my experience in the 26 years that I've been in the district. So as long as we keep looking and moving in that direction, I'm certain we're going to be in a very forward position as we move on. I'd also like to comment that another person who was an organizer and a well-known person to us was Lee Riley, who was helping to organize our summer helpers, who were comprised of both some high school students and college students. And it was interesting, they actually took great pride in knowing that they could get things from one building to the next in a timely way. So it was great to see that spirit of cooperation from them, which I think, again, contributed to the success of our move. And also, they had a special task in Nassau. We had to be up and running for our kindergarten orientation program by July 9th. And again, it took the work of all the staff and custodians within Nassau, as well as the people I've already acknowledged, to have the program up and running for that kindergarten orientation program during that time frame. When I look at facilities, once again, I have to thank, because in our ongoing continuous meetings, when Dave Downs and Michelle Maloney and Ann Reel and John, as we met in an ongoing way and looked at what had to be done in the buildings and tried to establish some priorities in the time frame that we had. You know, in Marble, I was so pleased, and I hope people have had a chance to come over and take a look at the stripe that was done in the Nassau hallway. I think it's really made the building pop. It's really those great students that made it pop tremendously, but the stripe added to it, I think it made a really bright looking building. And they also did some work in terms of painting some of the cabinetry within the building, so I was very appreciative of that. We drew some of the colors out from the stripe into the classrooms, and then some staff also chose some bright colors of their own, and I'm just so glad, because I'm always dressed in black and white. It was great to see those colors, because I think it was very inviting for the children. I think they were so excited when they saw those rooms. And when they think, too, of that move, it's a tremendous work of our teachers. Mr. Farrell acknowledged that, you know, when we looked, the teachers could not come in until August 1st. They got in there, they dove right in there and worked so tremendously hard to get those classrooms looking as wonderful as they would have looked if we hadn't moved. Tremendous effort on their part to pull all that off, to get their boxes unpacked, even to pack up to get ready for the move. It took a lot of effort on the parts of people acknowledged, as well as the staff within each of our buildings. I'd also like to acknowledge the great painting staff that we did have on board, and that was, I'm hoping I have Donna Holmeyer and Mary Foster, and Tony Elton jumped right in too and was helping to paint that cabinetry and some of the shelving within the Nassau building. As I think of, we also had some driveway work done to enable cars that were dropping students off to immediately enter to the left into the driveway. We had to extend the drive, we had to push the driveway parking spots back in one area, so that paving was done. They also had to remove a section of the fence in order to have a two-way traffic flow. Other facility works entitled work that was similar to the summer, but again responsive to the reorganization of the schools and how we were going to try to move cars out in a little different pattern than had been done in the past in Nassau, because we were blocking off the front driveway, which had always been a passing lane for cars in the past. But we knew with 9 buses coming in the morning that wouldn't be a good pattern. So they relined all the facilities in terms of the driveway marking areas where cars should be coming in. We put in an additional handicap slot behind the fenced-in area, and that was that responsiveness. When I think of that teamwork and that continuous improvement, I received a call from the parent, and immediately Facilities and Grounds was there to help. Dave Downs, and we got our handicap parking slot behind the fenced area, so no one could possibly be, everyone could have access to the building. The other thing that had been done, we had, as had occurred in Hagen, and as you heard in their report, we had the bathroom partitions changed. I was glad to see toilet paper dispensers changed. People worked so hard to get the building in shape. We also had some realignment of technology that needed to occur, not only the moving of smart boards, but also we wanted equal access to computers and within the classrooms. And in the past, Hagen had 5 in a classroom. Nassau had 4 based on their class size, but looking at the population, the needs of a reorganized school, we took a look at realigning that technology so that we had 5 computers in each classroom. So I was very pleased to see that also occur. Arrival dismissal. As I stated at the opening of my report, we're continually looking. We're not locked into one way of doing things or another way of doing things. It's not, as Mr. Farrell said so well, it's not that we're vested in I said it in a different way. We're not vested in a Hagen way or a Nassau way. When I think about all of my work in the 26 years in the district, I'm vested in a way that's going to guarantee the safety of children. And even if that means some tweaking as we go on, because there are new needs that in the best of planning need to be considered, we're going to respond to that because of children's safety and their learning. And we do the same thing in a learning situation. We're going to look and constantly monitor our kids' learning. If not, we're going to change the program. So both of these, and I know I'm mixing it in with my arrival dismissal, but I would just like to state to the board, that's the way we like to do business here. That's the way I think about what has made Spackenkill special over the years. And it is that blending of that wonderful community input and process and the support that I receive from everyone from district office to building staff personnel that enable that to happen. So I want to thank everybody. The staff stayed at the end of each school day last week reviewing procedures and a lot of communication with district office to make them better. And then today, as Mr. Farrell acknowledged, I think was our best day. And we're going to continue to look at it because there are things we need to change because kids are not landing up where they should be. We're going to do that in this go-forward position. And as I think about, and my best day was welcoming the students back, as I think about all of our work it's bringing the kids back and just having all our work and seeing them safe and seeing them learning on an ongoing basis every single day that brightens the buildings. It wasn't the stripes, it was the children. And it was the support from the community and the pulling together of the staff that made that such a good welcome for them. And I hope that that's extended each day, that they come into school excited. And part of our work last year is we think about how we were going to blend together the two buildings. There was a committee of staff that worked on a team called PBIS, which was the Positive Behavioral Intervention System. And what they did in their planning, we came up with a common set of behavioral expectations for students within each building. There was also the development of some lesson plans, because what we know, kids are going to know how to behave and know what to expect, and we tell them what to expect, and we reinforce what we expect every day in their work. And so that was the purpose of a lot of our work last year, and that's the way we started our year this year. The lesson plans were distributed to staff. We asked them, they addressed behavior. They're teaching those expectations in each of the areas the main areas that we identified as potential spots, like the bathrooms, the recess, the lunch periods, and hallway behaviors. So the staff are working on those expectations. We've already incorporated, we had a volume system that became, that was very effective, utilized in both buildings, and that was one called a zero volume, when we need absolute silence, which makes sense, and looking at a 1, there's a little conversational tone, so that students have a sense of what is a good noise that we can be at. And those volume levels, again, are transferable within all settings of the building. And also when we're outside and we need to give directions to students to come in safely. So those plans are in place. The lesson plans are out being distributed. We will be continually focusing on how effective our lessons were in teaching this with students, constantly evaluating if we need to do that better. Because behavior, although I acknowledge safety in one component and learning as being that constant, continual look at what we do to enable progress by gathering the necessary data that says, are they learning? Are they safe? If they're not, this is what we need to do. The same thing occurs when we're looking at behavior. So that was our opening of school, and I thank you very much. It was just a sheer pleasure welcoming the students back to school this year and working with the wonderful staff. Thank you.
Yeah. I don't know if it's much question, but more as a comment. I mean, everybody kind of alluded to it, but I think you can safely say that the first couple of days were rough as far as the busing piece went. From a time standpoint and, you know, some tweaks here and there that needed to happen. So first, that somewhat is not unusual because every time we have a first few buses of the first school year, you always have some of those issues. However, it was a greater concern this year because of the amount of busing that occurred, especially in the elementary schools, which many times had parents dropping off in the neighborhoods. So that being said, I would like to make a statement saying that I think you're seeing the times get to where the norm and the trend will be. So the time should become more consistent. I believe that I've seen several emails over the past few days on busing issues. If those issues have not been taken care of, please contact transportation and then follow up with Michelle Maloney if that doesn't work for you. If you contact transportation, try and avoid it during the time period of dismissal and something that you don't like or want a question answered or something, try and avoid those time periods because it's just easier, and they're busy at that time point. But again, to be proactive, I would so much to think that some of these issues will be addressed, will happen again next year. So I think maybe starting, thinking already about next year. I know this year has barely started, but some of the things that I would take from this is giving parents a much broader time frame for the first few days of when to expect their children. Because guess what? The new arrivals at the new 6th grade next year is going to be unsure about what bus to get onto. The kids that are there are meeting again over the summer for the first time, and they're going to be chatting a lot more from friends they haven't seen face to face in some time. So I would expect that some of those issues would happen every start. So I think we need to realize that and just get the word out that guess what? We can, by the time week 1 or 2 comes in, you'll have a very narrow time frame, bar, traffic, etc. that can always flare up. But that the first part of this first week or so to expand the expectations of the parents to be at the bus stop maybe at a broader time period because of the fact that things may be running a little bit later. So just some ideas and things that I came up with out of some of the emails as well as some of the comments that were made here tonight from the principals are things that I think can help ease some of these situations that we had starting up this year. Just my 2 cents. Anyone else? What? Sure.
Question or so? Are the buses from Hagen arriving to Nassau in time for an 8:45 start? I heard one day someone called the bus, it was 8:42, and by the time the kids get off the bus, get to their lockers, I mean, are the days starting at 8:45 or?
You mean at Nassau?
Yes. Like, I mean, as far as the buses from Hagen getting to Nassau, are they able to get there in time for an 8:45 instructional start, or does this need to be adjusted?
We're still working on that. The final bus. That's closer.
Because I mean, the
I
buses
don't
come
have
and drop
the
so
exact
fast.
time, I'm sorry, I didn't come down with my exact times to tell you that.
I mean, I'm just concerned because I know like first graders, their special begins at 8:45. So are they missing, some of this because the buses aren't able to? And so therefore, do the times need to be adjusted as far as having the 2 schools starting at the same
Well,
time?
we've seen improvement, and I'm optimistic that it's going to be better before I think about adjusting that time, and if we need to, keep an eye on it. And as I hope I stated, continue looking at the data to say, okay, were they getting here? Are they safe? What do we need to do? And in this case, if they're not there, we need to adjust that time in some way. Whether the reason has to be to adjust the class time, or we go back at transportation and look at what are we going to do to get that bus sooner. We have to look at the variables that are influencing why that bus isn't getting there on time. So I don't want to respond and say specifically that I'm going to adjust the time if it's something that we can do from the transportation standpoint to make sure that we're up and running and ready to have the children in that 8:45 special.
I mean, I'm just concerned because I heard some, obviously safety is the biggest issue. I've heard some unsafe conditions with buses trying to get as fast as they can from Hagen to Nassau with kids running around on the bus, changing seats. I've heard, and obviously that's a concern. I don't want the buses speeding to get to Nassau so that they can start at 8:45, which is, my main reason for bringing up this concern. And I know there were issues with buses number 8 and 9 that I heard in the morning, driving too fast, stopping, going past stops, and I don't know if we've had adults getting on those buses to see. Was that occurring? It wasn't. Now, do we have the video cameras now on the buses? So are we able to go and look at what's happening on these buses, those mornings where people are claiming that they're seeing kids switching seats and running around on buses and so forth?
Yes.
And let me just say, for the first 3 days, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday last year, I was at Nassau as well as superintendent. And for the first 3 days, all the buses were in by 8:45. So it's expected that as students know when to get on the bus, where to sit on the bus, when parents aren't asking questions about, afternoon runs, or in the beginning, taking pictures with the kids and things like that, that 8:45, if the first day of school the buses run by 8:45, it's expected that there's not going to be a problem with them getting there by 8:40, unless there's a traffic issue one day, or first day of school, it started raining about 15 minutes before the buses came in, and they were still in by 8:45. As far as the drivers speeding to get there, the drivers wouldn't be doing that because they could become in trouble and they jeopardize their license, number one. Number two, the first couple of days of school, a lot of times buses will have to pull over and ask the students to sit down. I was on a bus run this afternoon, and the big thing was for the students to have their legs out in the aisle, and a couple times the bus had to stop and tell them, you need to put your legs in the aisle, you need to sit down. We had a meeting with the drivers last week, and we had heard that there was a question about some kids standing on the bus, and we addressed it with both our drivers and our contracted drivers.
Also, as far as we all got, well, those of us with kids in the elementary school or at Nassau got a phone message that parents have to now sign their children out at Nassau before them being released. And then I heard that parents were just picking the kids up, though, and not signing them out. So I was wondering what the procedure actually was. Do they have to sign the kids out in the cafeteria or no?
What's actually happening, we're signing them now. We're checking our list, bringing them to the front cafeteria doors, having the parents come. I asked them today to come forward because the children were running to them, and I was just very nervous about that procedure because it's a big activity center right there in terms of buses and cars. So I asked the parents, and they were wonderful. They cooperated. They came forward to get their child today. So that's the procedure. So it's not that they're actually physically signing a piece of paper, but we are monitoring our lists, pending that they're there, and then identifying the adult that's coming to pick them up.
One other question has to do with some of I don't know if there's anything we can do about this for next year, but especially for the younger kids, having some more consistency regarding the bus drivers. There's some concern that now all the kids have 2 different bus drivers to and from school. I know like my son has 2 different bus drivers. He has 2 different bus stops. He has 2 different bus routes. And I mean, he's in 3rd grade, so it's not as bad for him. But I think, is there any way, especially I think for the younger kids, that we could give one of the 2 kids like the same bus driver, so that they're not all having completely different bus drivers to and from school? I mean, I think that would be more important for the younger kids if we are able to allow them to have the same bus driver to and from school instead of every student having a different bus driver to and from school. I know, especially with the younger kids, if there's a kindergartner, there's some concern. Well, okay, this parent is picking the child up, but how do you know that's the child's parent? And they can't match the face because it's different bus drivers. They don't get to know the children as well.
The contract that we have, and most when you have contracted services, is that the runs are put into a packet, and then the drivers are able to bid on those runs based on seniority. So while we can try and do that as much as we can for next year, if you have someone finishing a middle school run on the north end of the district, you might want to give them a run that starts on that area, or a school that's on that area. So we can try and look at it to see where we can be consistent, but we can't guarantee that.
Are we hoping to get dismissal to be 3 o'clock from both schools at some point, or we're still not sure?
I think it depends on what you mean by dismissal. John,
Well, it said, I mean, I know the information we're given said 2:45, walkers, 3 o'clock buses.
right, they start.
Clarification
So
of what that
you
means.
start getting the walkers out. I know, as Michelle said, I was at Nassau last week, and they bring the kids down in special lines. Some are the actual walkers who physically walk back and forth to school versus the kids who get picked up. So that takes a little bit of time. The buses start to come down at 3 o'clock, and then they're brought out to the bus when the bus arrives. So the procedures start at that time, but
So the procedures started at 3, that's what the 3.
well, 2:45 for the walkers and 3 for the buses, yes.
Buses.
And if the, yeah, John.
I would just add, I could see that walker release time maybe being extended to 2:50 possibly. I didn't know. I've honestly been really pleased with the fact that for the last 3 days, we've had all of our buses there by 3:01. I did not think that was going to happen. So I think in that way, we can take a little bit more time off, but our dismissal procedures are starting basically now at 3. What I didn't realize was that we wouldn't need so much time between when walkers were released and when we could release our bussers. So that 15 minutes is probably a little bit more than what we need. So for me, I mean, we haven't talked about this together, but if anything, I would say we would lengthen, that walker time would be extended a little bit more. That's the only thing that I see happening right now. As far as when our buses would be released, I think at best, like today it was 3:07, I think it's possible will be, 3:05, 3:06. That's really what I'm hoping for. And like for me, I'll take that.
But it seems as Nassau are a little bit earlier because it's just very inconsistent. My daughter was home one day at 3:03, and there's no way she's getting, and I missed her, actually. And because if the buses and the dismissal is starting at 3 o'clock, there's no way that bus, unless they're flying at the speed of light, is going from Nassau to my house and there by 3:03. So,
I guess one thing I would add to this piece is that all late buses are not created equally. And we have to ask the question, why is the bus late? Because there's many reasons that could make a bus late. For us, we have our buses lined up and they can't pass one another. So if the first bus in a row has an incident with a student that we're trying to figure out, that causes everybody to be late. So for part of it, I think on our end, is I don't want to make decisions about what to change or not to change until we know exactly what the pattern is. Was the bus late because one kid got on the wrong bus or because one route change didn't get communicated? For me, I think that stuff has to be sorted out. I don't want to go and make decisions about changes based on incorrect information. So I think we do need time to let the dust settle so we know what is the issue. 3 or 4 days from now, if we still have the same route that's consistently late, and we know it's not because the wrong kids are on the bus or the driver didn't have an updated list or the route, so then we know this is what we need to try and fix, or the length of this route is unacceptable, we need to make a change someplace else. For me, my experience tells me that we need not a lot more time, because right now at Hagen, our issue, our kids know which buses to get on now, their tags are up to date, everybody's got a tag. So the kinds of issues that we were dealing with a couple days ago, we're not right now. We might have some other issues, but it's not those. So,
One of the things too, that
for whatever it's worth.
I'm sorry. One of the other things that you realize at Nassau was Friday was the first day we had the kindergartners down the bus in the afternoon. So that was big. We were taking little ones and just trying to get them, even though we started early, trying to get them organized. It does take a little more time so they're in the routine
guess it's
And we're
just,
constantly reviewing it, to see how to make it better.
I guess it's just, I mean, I said before that fourth year, my kids' bus has never been more than 5 minutes late. And I guess it's just frustrating for people too, trying to get their kids after school. I mean, the ranges are just all over the place. We have kids scheduled for 4 o'clock after school activities, and we're just kind of wondering when are we going to really know when we can schedule our kids' activities, because it just seems to be still such a range of times, and I think that's causing a lot of the just discontent, I guess. Do we know how long the longest bus route is at this point? I know I've been hearing from some people saying that, like an hour. I mean, that seems unreasonable. Is this, are elementary bus routes really that long at this point? Some of them,
If you mean, what I can tell you is depending on the time they got out, like if they got out at 3:10, Friday was rough for Nassau because we did not get out as early as we had in previous days because of the kindergarten teachers. But the one that I wrote on today, which was one of the longest runs, I think we left and we were held up at Hagen after school program because originally scheduled were 5 students to get on the bus. There were 12 students on the bus, and we waited to make sure that the after school program checked them in. That took an extra 5 minutes, and we were done at 3:43. So that should be able to come back down to about 3:37 once all the kindergartners know where their stop is, where they're getting off, and that kind of thing. We physically that was our year run that we were on today, and we were physically counting the kindergarten students and checking their names while they got off to make sure they were comfortable with their stop. So that's where I was today, 3:43, and I don't think, I'm not trying to put Dave on the spot. I think, did you have anything coming in much later than that? Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else?
Thank you, principals and Michelle. The next presentation this evening is about our school lunch program. It was postponed from our August meeting. To give you just a little bit of background about this, in January, the First Lady and the Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack unveiled new standards for school meals. And under the final rule, nutrition standards in the school lunch and breakfast programs have changed, resulting in healthier meals for our children. The final standards make the same kinds of practical changes that many parents are already encouraging at home, and we are excited to be sharing with you the changes to our program this year as a result of that legislation. Thank you.
As Dr. Powell indicated, with me tonight is Lisa French. She's our school lunch director, who's been working on these changes throughout the last year. Throughout Lisa's time here in food service, the law really marks the most comprehensive changes that we have seen to school nutrition environment. And the goal of this Healthy Hungry Free Kids Act is to help combat childhood obesity and hunger. Some of the requirements as a result of this, we have to make available more fruits, vegetables, and whole grains, and we'll go through some of those examples. A variety of flavored or unflavored fat-free or low-fat milk, a reduction in sodium levels over the next several years, reduction in saturated and trans fats, and then we have to meet nutritional guidelines of school children within their calorie requirement, which is different for the different levels of students. So for lunch, over the next 2 years, they want us to increase the portion sizes for our fruits and vegetables, and weekly requirements of servings of the following. They want us to have more dark greens, kale, spinach, red and orange vegetables, carrots, beets, sweet potatoes, beans and peas. In fruits, they want us to have fresh fruits. We can have frozen fruits without sugar, or canned with light syrup, water, or fruit juice. Whole grains, they want to increase our whole grain rich foods. And milk now must be either fat-free or 100%. or 1%, sorry, plain or flavor-free has to be a factor. So the sodium levels, you'll see they do it based on breakfast and lunch, and they're targeting the first series on for the 14-15 school year. Currently, the federal states no set targets. New York has a setting of 1,200 milligrams, and the new standards are for K-12. So you can see here that lunch for 14-15 is at 1,230 milligrams for K-5, 1,360 for 6-8, 1420 for the grades 9 through 12. If you go up to the next target 2, for the school year 17-18, you'll see for lunch the 1230 is going to reduce to 935, and then down to 1,035 and 1,080. The final target year, which would be 2022-23, you'll see it's been dropped in half, almost to 640 milligrams, 710 and 740. And you'll see similar for breakfast. This is going to be up on our website under the school lunch, so if you want to take a more detailed look at it. Calories, right now we're looking at 664 calories, no more than that for grades K through 6, 825 for grades 7 through 12, and there's an option for K3 of 633 calories, and for breakfast 550. Saturated fat, 10% of total calories now, saturated fat, and there's no limit right now on trans fat. Under the new standards, you'll see that they've reduced by K5, 6, 8, 9, 12, the total calories for breakfast and lunch, and 10% of total calories for saturated fat will remain the same, but trans fats, there will be 0 grams per serving. So where are we now? In anticipation of this, we've made many changes for the 11-12 school year. Increased our portion size of vegetables and fruits that are offered. We have mostly whole grains that are offered. Examples, we've had brown rice, wheat bread, multi-grain buns. We've increased dark greens. We've had things such as homemade pumpkin soup, raw carrots, sweet potatoes, also homemade soups we've had, lentil, white bean, homemade hummus. We have no whole milk served, only fat-free and 1% is served. And additionally, the milk that we purchase is made without the use of any dyes and comes free from the RBST. And we've added some whole grain pizza and fat-free yogurt parfaits to the menu. Before we open up for any questions, we just want to say that as anyone, when you're introducing new foods to the students, sometimes we have to go back and forth and see what's catching on and what's not. As a result, this past year we had a survey from the school lunch fund on their likes and dislikes, and we're working on that to improve our menus going forward. But some of the things when the kids will come home and say, well, I want hummus or I like hummus, it's just a change and we're working through it. Are there any particular questions on your comments?
I have one question about, you say we're adding the dark greens, the lentils, the whole wheat, more of it. How are the kids responding to all that? Are they eating? Are they throwing stuff in the garbage?
The survey that we took is kind of all over the board. We're getting some things that say, give us some more healthy foods, but we want to keep the pasta. And someone else will say, we hate the pasta, but give us the chicken fingers. So it is kind of all over the board. It's a matter of trying it, seeing how it's going, and then refining it. We plan on meeting with the students again to get some better ideas, their likes and dislikes.
Obviously, in the past, you've gotten free supplies from the federal lunch program. Have they revised what they're sending to meet these standards, or are we
Yes.
still getting a whole bunch of cheese?
Yes, and we're working with the vendors. The vendors are aware of the changes, so they have to change if they want to meet with specs. So everyone is trying to get on the same page.
So are these more costly, all of these extra things that
Yes.
regulations? And are the school lunch prices going up as a result to offset those costs?
We did not have a school lunch increase this past year, and Lisa, we need monthly to monitor that to try not to have increases going forward, especially during downturn in the economy. But definitely some of the fresh vegetables and fresh fruits are much costlier.
And the
submitting our menus for October, November, and the state will be reviewing them, and we're in compliance, which we expect we will be. There'll be a 6-cent increase per meal. We'll be following that.
So 6 cents increase in funding from the state.
Correct.
So now, does this mean that we currently subsidize the school lunch program, right? So now is this costing us more?
No, we have subsidized the school lunch program for many, many, many years. Actually, for this past coming school year that we have now, we reduced that subsidy, and we expect to do that a little bit every year for the next 4 years.
With the increased cost? And actually, talk about the menus. Is there a reason why Haiti doesn't have menus yet? Lunch menus?
The paper version?
Yeah.
We did away with the paper version. They're online now.
Oh, well, okay, so I got one from NASA.
The school might have printed one.
Okay. But they should be
Posted
online?
it. Yes, you can read them online.
Thank you.
Okay, the last actual presentation for this evening is about the Dignity for All Students Act, which came into effect July 1st. So to give you a bit of an overview, this presentation actually comes directly from the state ed website. We've shortened it a little bit to reduce redundancies, but essentially it is on Engage New York. It can be found there if anybody wants the full presentation, or I actually have it as well and can get it to somebody. So the Dignity for All Students Act was something that was put into place actually in 2010, we'll see by the next slide, and did not take effect until this July 1st. One of the first times the state actually gave us a lot of time to prepare for something. Essentially what it does, and as our trainer explained it to us, New York State was looking to put into place an anti-bullying law, and actually as they worked through the language and edit things, it really became less of an anti-bullying law, although that's certainly a component of it, and more of an anti-hate legislation. So that the idea is that it reduces the number of protected classes that you're not supposed to discriminate against. So we, in New York State, actually have more protected classes than at the federal level. And we'll get into those specific areas in a moment. But essentially what it says is that not only can you not discriminate in terms of as a school against children or as an employer against individuals, but students cannot be harassed on the basis of these various profiles. So essentially, it's a law that says all students are entitled to an environment free of discrimination and harassment. This is the listing of the various organizations that were involved with the legislature in drafting the law. You can see PTA, you can see obviously New York State Education Department, as well as a variety of associations like NYSIT for the teachers, SANES for the administrators, the council up in the corner is the superintendent's organization. You have New York State Police, you have school boards, you have the Listen organization, you have BOCES. So it's really a very broad spectrum look at what needed to be done, and all of those organizations had voices in the current legislation. And it's not just student to student, but all students should be free from bullying by employees or students. These are the 11 areas that are the now New York State protected classes. And, you know, it's interesting, only the first one says actual or perceived, but as our trainer explained to us, really it's perceived in any of these cases. If, you know, somebody is saying that you're gay, for example, and the child is not gay, it doesn't matter that the child is not gay, it's still harassment under this law because it's the perceived notion that this child is. So it's not so much just about what actually is fact, but essentially if somebody perceives one of these things to be a reason for harassment, then it is covered by this law. It applies to all public schools, BOCES, and charter schools, and it applies to incidents on school property. School buses count since they are school property, even though it's not a school itself. And it applies to any kind of function that is sponsored by the school or takes place on school grounds. Next year, there is already a new law coming into place July 1st that extends the second piece of this to off-school property, and it includes cyberbullying more specifically. I mean, we've already been dealing with cyberbullying and the principals, which in some cases we've never had technology because of the problems that the cyberbullying can bring into the schools, especially at the secondary level. But next year that becomes a specific part of the legislation. Essentially, there were two SAVE requirements. You might remember the SAVE legislation from the early 90s. And one is the code of conduct. So we have had our attorneys review our code of conduct and make changes to incorporate the language of the For All Act. And actually the second piece is no longer true. At the time that the state put this presentation together, they were expecting that the reporting form would be the same as we use for something called their vital incident reporting. Now they have actually a whole separate reporting system for harassment and bullying. And essentially, this is the definition of harassment, conduct, verbal threats, intimidation, or abuse that reasonably causes or would reasonably be expected to cause a student to fear for their physical safety. And then the second part addresses the fact that it's based on perceived characteristics. It doesn't have to be the actual characteristics.